Hey, I'm Connie,
And I'm Noelle.
and we are product managers on the Data Factory team. We're so excited to be back for our second episode of our podcast series, the Data Integration Station. Whether you're a seasoned Data Factory enthusiast or a newcomer to Microsoft Fabric eager to explore fresh content, we promise to teach you something new every month.
This month, we're super excited to talk more about variable libraries in Fabric and how you can use this new artifact with your data pipelines. We also have a special guest who's going to be sharing more about how variable libraries has been a valuable new feature in building new powerful data solutions.
In today's episode, we actually have our very own Noelle walking us through the capabilities of variable libraries and pipelines. So let's get started.
Yeah, let's get started. So let's talk a little bit more about variable libraries. For those of you who have not seen any of the announcements or any of the blogs, variable libraries is a new platform, Fabric platform artifact that we've added to allow you to kind of bucket all your workspace level variables in one place. What does this mean? This means that anything that you put into your variable libraries will be able to be consumed across your workspace artifacts, whether that be data pipelines. Other artifacts are going to be onboarding into this soon, so data flows as well, or your lakehouse or your notebooks, so on and so forth. That way you can keep all your variables in one place and then you can use them across all these different things. So theoretically, if you had a table or a SQL database that you wanted to use in your data pipelines, but also wanted to use that same thing in your notebooks, you wouldn't have to keep manually making changes or manually setting these configurations up in any of your artifacts. You can just keep it in your variable library and then call it in each of the things that you would like. So some high level things that you might want to take a look at if you haven't seen it already. Let me go ahead and share my screen. These will be really helpful for you as you're getting to like familiarize yourself with variable libraries. But if you go to the Microsoft Fabric documentation, under CI/CD, you'll find this new section here called variable libraries. Hopefully you're able to see my screen. Yes, Connie?
Yep, I
Yes.
can see it.
Okay. And you'll be able to kind of walk through all the different things that are related to variable libraries, how they get started and whatnot. So find all the details here. Something to call out is that right now the supported items are data pipelines and shortcuts is in preview. A lot more to come, and hopefully we can share some more about that with you later on in this episode. Also to call out is that there is a doc page for variable library integration specifically with data pipelines. And so again, this is also in preview, but if you go through this documentation, it walks you through step by step. So if you're getting lost in this podcast or getting lost in some of the demo videos that we show or share with you, this documentation should be helpful. Now, let's get into the actual nitty gritty of things. Let's go to my Fabric workspace. So first thing I want to share with you is how you can find variable libraries. So before you can even use variable libraries with your data pipeline, you're going to have to create a variable library. So under new item, you can filter for variable library and you should see it in preview. Super easy. You create this like you would anything else in your workspace. So you go ahead and click create, rename it if you want, and then you can kind of take a look at what your empty variable library looks like. So when you're ready, you can go ahead and add new variables by clicking new variables and so on and so forth. I actually already have a pretty hefty variable library set up. So here I can kind of walk you through some of the other things that you can do with it. Now you can have lots of different types of things in your variable library. So you can kind of see here in this drop down all the different types of variables you can hold. Additionally, you don't just have one value to set for your variable, you can add in alternative value sets. And so this is super helpful in your CI/CD story. For example, if you have a deployment pipeline, you have different environments that you want to deploy to, you can set these value sets for the different environments that you have. So for example, maybe dev test prod or any other amount that you might have. And then every time you want to change the value, all you would have to do is set as active. So only one value will be active for each variable at a time. So whatever is set as active is the one that you would see. So right now, all of these ones are my active values. So very high level on what variable library looks like. Now let's take a look at pipelines. So in your pipeline, um, I actually prepared something already, but wanted to call out that when you click your canvas, so click the blank space over here, and you'll see the bottom canvas. There's a new tab specifically for variable libraries, or library variables. And what you want to do is go ahead and create your references here first. Note that some of this might change a little bit as we move into GA, but this is kind of how you're setting it up now for a public preview. So you just have to set a name for your variable, but then you can choose from any libraries that exist. So you can actually have multiple variable libraries in one workspace. So you can choose which one you want. And so this might make it a little bit easier for you to organize depending on like what your team and what projects you're working on. And then within that variable library, once you selected it, you should be able to see all the variables that exist in that variable library, and then you can select the one that you want to add. Calling this out because you do have to set this step first before you're able to use any of your library variables in your dynamic content, so in any of the expressions that you see going forward. So today, what I kind of want to show is how you can also use library variables with connections. So that's something that we get asked a lot about, is like, how can we parameterize our connections? And for now, this is kind of a way that you can do it, is using your connection GUID. And so if you are a little bit curious about what that means, I can show you how that goes. So here I have something configured already. And you can't really tell what my connection is except for with the connection type, which is ADLS Gen 2. Now, normally with your connection, what you do is you select from something that you've already created, or you click more and you create a connection. If this will pop up, it'll show you that. I think maybe give it a second or so. Yeah. So here's where you would choose your data source, you would configure it and set it up. I'm not going to do that, but you can also select from something you already have, and then you can also use dynamic content. So to use dynamic content, this is where you start setting your expressions. And if you click on these three buttons here, you can actually go to library variables and choose from the existing variables that you have from your library or from your variable library. And so for me, it's connection ID. And I think you had heard me say GUID before. So for the specific connection ID, you would have to use your connection GUID. And how will you find this? I can show you. So in Fabric, you have the option to go to your settings at the top, which is up here, and then you can click Manage Connections Gateways. And when you click on this, it'll take you here to where you have all your connections and all your gateways. So for me, I am using my demo storage down here. So when you click the three dots, click, and you click settings for your connection, you'll see a connection ID GUID. So for me, my ADLS Gen 2 storage connection ID would be this. And so this is the value that you want to copy. And this is the value that you want to hold in your variable library as a string. So as you can see, in my ADLS Gen connection down here, this is the value, 8005, blah, 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 blah. And that is exactly what I just copied and pasted. So that is how you would find your connection ID GUID. And then once you've stored that as a string, you'd be able to use it in your pipeline to parameterize your connections. So that is how I got there. Then you can also continue to use dynamic content for the other fields that you would like to parameterize. And so for me, that is my folder and also my file name. And once I do this, what's really cool is that actually you can actually use preview data with your library variables. So if you still wanted to see what your variable data or what your data looks like once you parameterize everything, you would be able to see your expressions, what the values are that you're going to be using in these fields. And then you would be able to preview your data and make sure that everything looks correctly before you move on and build more in your solution. Um, yeah, so I think those are some big things to call out, but otherwise, you can use your library variables just like you use any other parameter or variable in your pipeline. So you can use them with all different types of activities, and you can build lots of different expressions in it. And then, of course, once you're ready to run your pipeline or save your solution, you go ahead and click save, and then you can go ahead, oops, and you can go ahead and run that. So that is kind of a high level on variable libraries and how you can use it in pipelines. We've made a couple other demos on this before. So on our YouTube channel, you will also be able to see other videos regarding variable libraries. So if you wanted to get a very high level view, go ahead and watch variable library, now supported in data pipelines. And if you want a little bit of a deeper dive into the connection parameterization with the library variable GUIDs, Mark has also made a very cool and helpful video. And I guess before we kind of close things off on this, this feature has been super helpful, and we hope it'll continue to be helpful for all of you in your CI/CD Fabric story. And Connie is actually our CI/CD woman, so she can talk to you a little bit more or share a little bit more about how this is kind of completing the CI/CD story in Fabric and helping to bring that into a more comprehensive solution for people.
Yeah, definitely. So inside of CI/CD, variable libraries is going to be huge. So as Noelle showed, you can use environment-specific configurations. So basically with variable libraries, you can now define multiple value sets for each variable, one for each environment like dev, test, and prod. So during deployment, the pipelines that are activated can be set to the right value for the target stage. So this means you no longer have to manually edit or hard code values. You'll have the variable libraries automatically set up. Something else I want to call out is that the actual variable library item inside of your workspace works with Git and deployment pipelines. This means that they're stored in folders like Git with JSON-based schemas for both variables and their value sets, and this gives you full version control. This means you're able to roll back, you're able to move your variable libraries from dev to test to prod. So if you have a variable library set in dev, you can set your dev values to be active, deploy it to test, set your test values to be active, and so on and so forth, which is super exciting. And I guess one more thing for CI/CD is that there's multiple supports for data types. So it supports things like Booleans, datetime, integer, GUIDs, numbers, strings, anything that you can think of. Variable libraries pretty much supports all variables, which is super useful in terms of using this reusable content across your workspaces inside of Fabric. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and there are definitely new types coming out as well because, like, we do know the importance of connection parameterization, so there will be some new built-in types that will allow for that, and also array, and so on and so forth. Um, we will do our best to share some more of the roadmap updates on our podcast as well. So please check out our documentation and check out the description of the video to find more resources for that. Yeah, that is all I had for today. And then if you have any questions, feel free to comment or feel free to send an email, and we can talk about this a little bit more too.
Cool. Thanks for showing us more about what we can do with variable libraries, especially in data pipelines, Noelle. And now we have a special guest, Tim, who's going to show us how he uses variable libraries in his work stream.
Now we bring our special guest in, Tim, and he's going to be here talking to us today about variable libraries and some other things in Fabric that he really loves or wishes that we could add in. So thank you for joining us today, Tim. Would you like to give us a brief introduction of yourself and kind of tell everyone who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thanks for having me first. And I'm Tim. I'm working as a consultant in Germany as a partner of Intelligent of Microsoft. And this has gotten me the opportunity to get in some of the previews, see what's going on in Fabric, and provide feedback here. And I think it's already mentioned, like one of my favorite topics in Data Factory is the parameterization. So I'm really glad that we now have the variable library as a new artifact in Fabric. And yeah, it will change the way we work with Fabric today.
Very cool. So what exactly about parameterization do you love for your work?
It makes it so much easier to just spin up a pipeline and reuse it again, to just have that reusable aspect to the data pipelines. Like I don't have to copy activities in my pipelines for every new table that I want to copy. I can just spin it to the next level where I just pass in server names, table names, or even like complete queries and just reuse those artifacts. And I can separate my code and my configuration when working there. So I check in my pipelines and I can even hand off the configuration on how and what tables should be loaded to my colleagues who have more information about the tables available. So I can tell them, hey, you know best what tables you need from the system. So maybe you can go ahead and fill in the blanks here, provide me the table names, provide me the business keys, or even how this table should be historized in our data platform. Maybe it's just some once used data, or maybe you should start to historize it. And that's all parts that we can add using metadata to enhance our actual ELT process. That's what I really like about it.
Yeah, super cool and super useful. Would you be able to show us some of the ways that you incorporate this into your work?
Sure, I can show a little demo that I've recently shown at FabCon as well. So maybe we can have some insights here. Let me share my screen.
Yeah.
So this is right now the post FabCon state of our workspace. So most of the demo is already done, but I can provide a short overview and walkthrough here.
Yeah.
So what we have here is a simple workspace with two lakehouses. We have a lakehouse bronze and the lakehouse confidential. And as the name provides, maybe we want to split some of the tables we load into our regular lakehouse, and maybe some of the data should be not accessible to everybody. So we want to reroute it into our confidential lakehouse. And while earlier we had to use separate copy activities for that, just to be able to route into different things or even read from different sources, with our new variable library, we could spin this up to just have separate things here. Maybe let's start with the variable library itself. In case you don't know what it is yet, here you can see it. We can define a list of variables now. And we can provide multiple value sets for that. And that's just amazing because that's, I think no other platform offers this yet. We often have solutions where we like query for the workspace name, and if it contains dev or prod, we can then determine where we want to go. Or we have separate databases that contain environment-specific values. Now we have a UI, we can define the variable names and the individual values for our different environments. So for this demo, I kept it simple. We just have like 8 or 9 variables and 2 different value sets. And I could just say, okay, for this demo now, I want to use the production environment. I probably better don't do so. It's still dev. And now all these values marked as green would be red when we reference them in our pipelines. As of now, we can only use them in pipelines, but I think at the keynote already it was shown how to use them in notebooks later, and I think this will be rolled out soonish. So really looking forward to that as well. Let's go back to that and have a look at how it looks in the pipeline. So right here, we only see a simple copy pipeline, and I'm already at a copy activity. So maybe let's take a step back and start at the very beginning. And maybe you've already seen that now we have a new tab in our data pipelines called Library Variables. This is already available in each tenant. Potentially, you need to activate the preview to be able to also create this artifact. So if you don't find it under new items, contact your admin and he will activate it for you, hopefully. And once you created our new variable library, we can now reference it here in our pipeline. We can create new names. And we select simply the different libraries we have available. And in a further dropdown, we then actually map our pipeline variable to the variable in the library. So that's really cool. And we can also see how the data types are propagated into our data pipeline. And what I did, I'll quick switch back. In here is I defined a list in a string. So that's a JSON string where I defined the target, the source schema and the source table name and a simple flag to is this table to be treated as confidential or not. And you can probably already guess where this is going. So in our for each loop, I read in my variable library and reference the just mapped tables variable. And we've seen it was a JSON string. So since there's no object type, I utilized the JSON function to turn it into an object. And I also had to escape some or replace some escape strings here. But then it works just fine. And we have an array containing the objects for the different tables you want to load to iterate over. And then the next step, we can have a look at our table, and I'm connected, in this case, hardwired to my source database. But we could also replace this connection with a variable containing the GUID for the connection. And then I just say, okay, look in this database and this schema and then this table, which we're currently iterating over. In the destination, it looks a bit more different. We can see that we have 3 different locations where I have placed expressions. And to make it a bit more readable, I quickly switch over to the JSON view. And I already can see it in the preview. We have changed it. So here we have the linked service part of our connection. And I've replaced the name, the workspace ID, and the artifact ID with more or less the same expression, just referencing different variables of our just shown library. And for all of them, the expression starts with an if condition, asking if the is confidential set of our current item is true. And if so, we use the according name, workspace, or artifact ID of our confidential lakehouse. Else we use our default lakehouse. And yeah, what you say, this turns out to work really great. I can maybe give a little demo run. Everybody loves live demos, which tend to fail, so fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed for the demo gods.
Also shouldn't take very long. I probably should not have said this. Every time I say it takes long.
I know, it's the constant refresh.
And this should more or less be it already. Yeah, first table is already through. Cool. Nothing special to see here. Maybe have a little look like, yeah, it's just 15 rows that I'm copying here. It's really just a demo environment. Mm-hmm. But if we now have a look at the lake houses in here, we can see that, for example, in the lake house confidential, we should see, I think, 2 tables that have been copied here. Voila. We have our 2 tables. And on the other end, we should see, I think, 3 tables that I've copied over. And we can see the 3 tables we copied over. So yeah, just like that, we can utilize the new item to route our tables to different things, which is really cool, I think. And before we had to use different copy activities for that. So yeah, that's part 1 of the demo. Maybe we can also have a look at the next step, which this is really meant for, the deployment pipelines.
Yeah.
Because that's where it really shines, right? We have already seen we have multiple value sets. We not just have one value we can deploy to, where we can read from.
That's true.
So as you can see, this workspace is called dev. I also have another workspace ready to use, which is called prod. Surprise. And some artifacts are missing because typically in the demo, I only show the deployment once. And we can also already see that in this production workspace, the other value set is set to active. So if I now go to my deployment pipeline, and we have a look at the differences he figures out. I will for once try to override the library just to showcase that this feature also stays the same. And maybe let's just bring over our new variable demo here. And after a short waiting period, we should see one unchanged item and one new item. Let's get back to our workspace. And we can see that this item is more or less untouched. We still have the productive value set to active. And this is where it really shines. If you compare it to data pipelines, which tend to be overwritten in the connections from the from the deployment pipeline, by referencing variables, we now don't have, let's try this one again. By referencing the variables in here, we don't have to go into the pipeline after deployments and need to set all the connections again. So I really like this change here. If we have a look at the deployment pipeline again, we can see there are no deployment rules. So we can't set the active value set in here, but I think it doesn't matter because if we click twice in the deployment pipeline to change the value set, or if we move to the target workspace, and let's just do that for a moment here, and click into our new freshly deployed library and have one more click here to set it as active, it's the same amount of clicks, more or less. And now it remembers that it should keep this value for this workspace, and we are done. As easy as that. Okay, and maybe we can also, another thing I really like about the variable libraries is that they come straight out of the box with Git integration. So from the very first get-go, we can just make sure that our metadata also is versioned, and we can have a look at who changed it, and or maybe even use our pipelines to contribute to that. We can convert our existing pipelines. If we have any databases, we can now try to put those code-driven into a JSON structure and turn them into a new variable library, which makes migration of existing metadata-based approaches much easier. And also with the, what else could I show? Sorry. All right, maybe I should highlight this as well. So it's not just that we can define different variables with different data types. We can also document what we want to achieve with that variable. So for each variable, we have up to 2,000 characters to leave a little note to our colleagues. And in this case, for example, I describe, hey, this variable should contain a list of tables to be extracted from the source system, and please stick to the following schema. Of course, this isn't enforced yet, but as soon as we are trying to parse it, there will be at least some sort of proof that it is actual JSON. So that is also really nice in here. Should we have a look at the Git integration as well? Like, what does it look like in the
it's
repository?
up to you if you wanna show us how you're collaborating. Yeah, we'd love to see it. I mean, so far, like, this is really awesome to see how you're really taking use of all the different aspects of variable libraries and its integration. Like, it's so cool to see that like you're using the variables also with logic in the expression builder to kind of help create like more use in your pipeline. I think is like that's really awesome to see. And I know like I've played around with variable libraries a lot, so like I've used it more for like simple use cases, but it's really awesome to see that like you can really extend it to like a wider variety of like use.
Yeah, that was my biggest struggle when switching to the libraries in the first place. Coming from a database, we typically have tuples for each item. So we can say, okay, we have like the schema name, the table name, and so many more attributes we can just append and iterate over those. And now we have the variables individually, and we have to reference the variable in the pipeline. So it's harder to align values of individual variables. And that's why I made the switch to the JSON document within the item.
Yeah. Do you think it would help like when like variable libraries is able to support array types as well?
Yes, that would be of great use. And I think I already had a little discussion with Mark where he mentioned that maybe we could also use it as some sort of mapping layer to a database.
Oh,
That if we
cool.
already have a database, we can use like basically as a UI for the database and just map a column to a variable there. I think that would also be really neat. Let's have a look at our repository. I'll just quickly switch to my demo. Okay. So what we can see here is the artifact level representation of the library we've just created and also had a look at. And maybe let's start in the average platform JSON that is associated with every Fabric item. Not much going on in here, but two things to consider. First of all, the display name, and second of all, the logical ID. These are important because, of course, there are some limits to the library. And as of now, a library can only be a size of 1 megabyte. So if we have more metadata, we need maybe to clone it because we want to have the same structure but different values. And for me, the easiest thing to clone it would be to just copy the item in the repository, change the ID, change the name here, and change the name of the folder, and I am done. So that's the platform JSON to consider for. In the variables JSON, we can see the actual definition of all the variables we just saw in the UI. Here's our tables variable. We can see that the node we have written there also appears in our code. We can see the data type definition as well as the values for our default value set. Now in here, we don't see any of the other value sets. These are in a separate folder called value sets. And per value set that we add to this library, we'll get a new JSON that represents the name of this value set and simply contains the name of the variable it is overriding and the new value for it. So that's really neat and allows us to interact even on code level with these artifacts. Although the need for it should be drastically reduced because we already have all the environments in there. So yeah, best use case for me is cloning them and then just editing them straight here. If we ever mess up and have like multiple environments and they are in the wrong order, as of now, we don't have a little drag and drop icon in the UI. I guess that's due shortly as well. But for now, we can simply edit the settings JSON and rearrange the value sets here. I guess I can better highlight that in the other set. So we move over here. You can see it's the same structure, but we have two value sets defined in here, test and prod. And if we have a look at the settings, we can see that test and prod are also defined in the order here. And if we want to change that, we can just copy this line. If I'm not in the edit mode, I could have copied that line and moved it in front of test, committed, synced my workspace, and the new order would be reflected there as well. So that's really cool how we just, from the very beginning, we have everything. We have the pipeline integration, we have Git integration, we can use it in the data pipelines. I'm really looking forward to the notebook utils integration. So many ideas on how to utilize this in all of my data platform projects.
Yeah, this is so cool. I guess a question for you, now that you're more of an expert on using variable libraries, what is probably the most helpful hint or tip that you can give to someone who's new to all this that you found helpful now that you know it, or would be helpful for them to know as they're getting started?
Yeah. I think for me, one of the best tips would be to utilize more logic in the expression language with the variables. Utilize the JSON strings as I have shown them to turn them into objects in the data factory, because this allows you to add so much more context to your item that you're iterating over. And when building those pipelines, take a step back from the problem you're trying to solve and think, how would you solve it in a generic way first? Like, okay, this system does it in this specific way, but maybe if we are talking about Azure SQL databases or on-prem SQL Server, is it always the same method I am using? Is it really just the name of the table that I need to switch? And all the other parts in my pipeline could be reused. So talking about delta loading mechanisms, can I reuse one mechanism across all databases of the same type? Probably yes. So I try to design my pipelines with that in mind. And that also helps to come up with more or less the structures of those variable libraries.
Very cool. That is a cool thing to kind of take note of. I'll have to try it out myself. Connie, do you have any other questions for Tim today?
Yeah, no, this was a super awesome demo of like the complete life cycle of a variable library. And as we saw, variable libraries is in public preview right now, and we've got some ideation going around like arrays and stuff. But that being said, I'd also love to hear your thoughts on where you see the future of variable libraries or even CI/CD in Fabric.
That's a very good question, especially now that we also have the new Fabric CI/CD module in place. They already tend to solve similar issues with the parameter replacement in the library. I think it is easier to use the variable library for that because I don't need to have a separate parameters file that I need to maintain in my repository. And every time I create a new lakehouse or a new connection, I need to go back to the repository, enter the new GUID. Using the libraries for all those global parameter use cases, for example, in the Azure Data Factory, that's the perfect use case as of now. Just making sure we have environment-specific values, put them in there. I think it was also announced that pipeline schedules will support them. I like to use, when I reuse my pipelines, often have different configuration names for different systems. So now I can use the library to provide those names into my schedule. I have multiple schedules, different values. So that's something that I can reuse there. And I am still very on the code-driven side when it comes to deployments, because oftentimes we need to integrate with more systems or have some quality checks enabled there as well. But when it comes to parameterization, I definitely see the variable library there as the new standard. And I would highly appreciate if you would actually get like an array data type. So I've just shown it helps a lot.
Yeah, totally. There are definitely a lot of improvements that are coming out with variable libraries, and so we'll definitely keep you in the loop on all of that. But like definitely continue to share your thoughts with us, because like it's so helpful to see like how you're really using these and what we can do to make your life easier as you are building. I guess with that, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and we hope to have you back soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
A huge thanks to Noelle for walking us through variable libraries and pipelines today, and a huge thank you to Tim for joining us for our second podcast episode.
Before we go, we'd like to encourage all of you to continue to engage with us by sharing feedback or suggesting topics in the comments below. If you're interested in getting involved, like joining us as a guest, please reach out to either me or Connie. We also have our contact information linked in the description, so check that out. Don't forget to follow our team on social media. We all do have LinkedIn, and I guess we do have our YouTube, so follow us on YouTube to stay updated on new feature releases and more. See you all next month for next episode.